welcome everybody. This webinar is brought to you by LightBox Expo, which is happening October 14th to 16th, 2022 in Pasadena, California. And that's where you go to meet all the artists, the creatives behind all your favorite movies, games, animation, and illustrations. As well as, this is also brought to you by Schoolism. Schoolism is the place to go to learn from those amazing artists behind your favorite things. And today we have some wonderful guests that are joining us for a networking webinar, all about networking. And so first, I want to welcome Annalise Salgado here. Annalise is the Associate Manager and Outreach for Walt Disney Animation Studios, as well as the co-founder and creative producer of Sound and Vision. And then we also have Allison Mann, who is the co-founder of Brick, as well as the talent manager and co-president of Fourth Wall Animation Productions at Fourth Wall Management. And I also have my wonderful co-host, the amazing, the wonderful Maureen Fan, 9-time Emmy winner, as well as CEO of Baobab Studios. My name is Bobby Chu, and today it's all about networking and how to build that network. Does anybody have any tips for meeting people at live events? Why don't we start off with that, since Lightbox is a little bit around the corner and San Diego Comic-Con just happened as well.
Well, I want to give what Bobby said in a previous webinar, which you all have to watch all the webinars, especially the one on introversion for networking. But Bobby said that he goes early. Actually, Bobby, you give your tips about what you do, like going early, siphoning off the significant other, all the tricks.
So what Maureen is talking about is, I was saying in another webinar that I make sure that I go early to events or I go there on time, but generally I try to get there early, because if I was saying, an example was going to a Disney party at Comic-Con. It started at 8 o'clock. I got there at 7:45. And then I went in. There were 3 people there. 1 person I knew, 2 people I didn't. But I had meaningful conversations with all 3 of them because they had nobody else to talk to, right? It's easy that way. As opposed to if the party has started and they are surrounded by a bunch of people that want to talk to them and they have connections with already.
And I also liked your tip about you talk to the significant other who's probably annoyed that they're there, and then you make them and then they will drag their spouse.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. But anyway,
oh, thanks.
you guys.
Well, Annalise or Allison, do you have anything that kind of comes to mind as well?
Sure. In terms of live events, I love that tip about the significant other, because especially on the weekends or a place that involves travel, it's not unheard of. But I also agree, catching people when, they're fresh or, kind of fresh-faced and available is really good. I, having a creative and an artistic background, tend to sort of jump right into the visual of what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing. So if I'm trying to meet with an artist and I'm walking around a place like Lightbox, I try to approach everyone's booth with curiosity and have something that I am resonating with at their space. A studio could have that as well. If there's an incredible piece of artwork or something new that they've got that they're sharing with everyone, I sort of jump into that visual world right away and have a bunch of questions about how they made it or what the inspiration was, or even something really elemental. Like, I love the line quality of that. Like, I lean into my artistic background as a way to sort of start a conversation with someone else who's creative. And I've found that by being curious about what they do, they're also very interested to share more about what that process is or how they did it, and forming those connections out of something that we both genuinely are interested in and maybe already share some kind of a vocabulary about. Before we talk about anything bigger picture or career or anything, I find that that's been a really good place for me to start at these types of live events.
I love
Fantastic.
that. That's really good tips. I love leading with curiosity, because people love to talk about themselves at the end of the day. So, like, if you're just standing there and there's blank stares, and most of the time, like in our artist community, everybody is a little bit socially awkward. Like I know, even though I network for a living, like I still am super uncomfortable, like getting in there, like unless I'm hosting something. If it's somebody else's party, even to this day of a personal, like I prefer to host my own parties versus going to somebody else's, because I can control my environment. Like there's something not comfortable when you have to step outside of your comfort zone and start to engage. So I think some things is like, yes, finding kind of that connective tissue, but it's also about knowing yourself. Like, what is your motivation for talking to this human or this studio? Like, what is the purpose? Find your purpose for that communication. I think sometimes I don't believe in overly preparing for anything. I think sometimes we can over prepare, and that then we get stuck in our own way, in our own heads about how communicate, like how that conversation might go or what the outcome might be. But I think the more that you can look internally and kind of prepare of like, okay, what am I comfortable with? What do I want to get out of this conversation? And then leading with those things, I think that helps to set the stage, and you can have more ownership versus feeling like you have no ownership when you're approaching somebody for a conversation. I like taking some of the control back in my world when I can.
Maureen,
And
you
the
wanna
chat
add?
is back on, it looks like.
Yay.
Yes, the chat is back on. Yay.
Yay. No, I have no advice on this, except I have a question, because I always feel, so I tend to be very direct. And if I want something, I just say what it is I want. But I've also been given feedback that it's like dating. You can't just go straight for the jugular. You gotta do the little dance, the
Finesse.
courtship
Gotta finesse.
dance to make them like you first. And then I hate that. I'm like, why can't I just ask whatever? So I ask you, like, do you guys have advice on which way is better? Because on the one hand, direct is just succinct to the point, but maybe they don't like you as much that way. What's your advice on that?
Well, I think it's finding kind of like acknowledging your directness. Like, hey, I know we just met. This might seem out of the blue, but I really like, my intention of this conversation is this, and this. I think if you like acknowledge what their headspace might be before asking the question, that helps diffuse the certain situation. I often handle conversations with adults like I handle talking to my toddlers or my kids. It's like, one, people like in general, like when I'm diffusing situations in corporate America, it's about like acknowledging their disposition or how they might be feeling. Like, and then from that, it kind of like disarms them. In my retail years, we used something called the mirror method, where you match somebody's cadence in conversation and how their body language is, which is harder to do virtually, but in real life, you can really kind of match. And when you match all of those things, again, that person's going to become more comfortable with you because you're matching all of those things. So then you can kind of get into the root of the reason for what your intention for the conversation. So I think first it's to disarm. I believe in being like forward as well and not skirting around anything, but I think you can do it in a way that disarms first, and then you can ask for what you want.
I love that you brought up your retail experience. That's also, I have retail experience. I think a lot of people have retail experience while they're, in school or trying to make something else happen. And a lot of times, like, it's not super clear in the moment how valuable that's going to be, but it is. And I feel like I lean on those skills, the same ones that you just mentioned, all the time, in order to facilitate all the various, opportunities personally and professionally. You have to go up and ask someone what they need all day long. Like, that will do something to you in terms of how you, take that behavior elsewhere and how you might apply it to another situation, but it still totally applies. And it's really helpful. I also get the comment about being direct, and too direct. But I feel like I agree with what's been said about disarming. And also the genuine, like how genuine you are is also something that's felt. Like if I'm being direct about something, but I'm genuinely excited about that, like it might come off as like, oh, wow, I didn't expect her to go there right away, but I love how enthusiastic she is about something that, you know, I'm doing or I might have a part of. And so I think that energy level, when it is resonating, is also felt and tends to kind of convert those like quick meetings into something that might be a little bit deeper, or something that you might discover both of you want to nurture. You know, in this moment, maybe there's no immediate application, but that energy and that connection is something that sparks and that stays, and then you nurture from there.
I actually
That's
seen
so
the
good.
reverse be more detrimental, where people don't ask what they want and then make assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions, like I can't do this, or like they're not going to want me to. They're not going to think I'm a fit for X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes, like that fear of rejection is often our biggest like crutch of failure. Kind of that fear of like what will somebody's response be, like, because the rejection feeling doesn't feel good, but at the same time, if you don't put yourself out there and you don't ask what you want, like people don't know what they don't know. So I think it's a balance of like, especially as you're developing your career and you're trying to figure out how to get those opportunities. So it is kind of a dance, like and there's some skill that goes into it, but I think it's like intention coupled with curiosity, that's carried out coupled with like knowing kind of what you want. Like oftentimes I have conversations where sometimes having exploration, like an exploratory conversation, totally fine. But then it's expectations versus reality. Like, and people want to know what they're getting set up for that conversation. So when I reach out to people, say in my recruiting years, I wanted somebody, they were passive. They were a passive candidate, which means they weren't looking for a job. Like when I was working with Maureen at Zynga, and we were building up Farmville, we did a lot of what we called passive sourcing. So we needed to build up teams fast. We couldn't just rely on people applying for jobs and referrals. So referrals are people who refer people into companies. So we would have to go on LinkedIn and other avenues, maybe Twitter or Instagram, to see if people were interested in potentially joining Zynga. And the way that we did that, it wasn't just like a blank, like, hey, I'm from Zynga, we have this job opening, can you come over? It's like I emailed with purpose. I reached out and connected with purpose. So I did my research on the human. I would find something that related to the role and why I felt they would be a good fit for that role. So like have intentions and purpose when you're having these conversations. So it's like, Maureen, you could be direct with somebody with what you want, but there's a reason why you're coming to them. So they feed their ego, let them know why. You know what I mean? Like, so there's kind of that balance of like kind of that delicate dance of like feeding an ego and getting what you want.
I love everything that y'all said there. I would love to add a little thin layer over top and just be like, also read the room, right? Read that energy. Because when I go to New York, I just naturally start talking faster, you know, because the energy there generally is at a faster pace. But if I go to Texas or something, then I tend to just find myself just chilling out and just naturally slowing down, because for me, it's all about communication. And if somebody is used to a certain kind of communication to truly hear you, then that's what I want to give to them so that they'll have an easier time to hear me, but in a genuine way. You know, I'm not going to fake a British accent if I'm in London or something like that.
Although, can you do it now for us?
No, I don't.
Just checking. Our UKers in there. How was that for Bobby get a passing grade? Awful.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
That's a good point though, Bobby.
Thanks. Maureen, do you want to pick a question?
Let's do Francisco. Let me Am I allowed to? Do I have the host abilities?
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm a little. Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Okay. Francisco, you have the mic. You have the floor. What question do you have?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey guys. Sorry, my English is not that good. I've been practicing, but yeah.
Sounds
I'm
great.
currently
Yeah.
I'm currently studying by myself. Like last 3 years, I've been studying like doing digital art, and recently I started to take a few courses. So my question is, at which point I should decide to make like a step forward. Like I just post on Instagram and that's it. I would like to do something bigger. I really want to create something or be part of a group to do something. You know what I mean? But I don't know how to do that. Like the next step. You know what I mean? Like what should I do? Yeah.
I could still remember when I started social media, before it was even called social media. And it's kind of a ghost town. At first, you're kind of on a deserted island making art, you know. So what you want to do, what you'll find is when you start engaging with other people's art, then you get reactions, right? And you could also engage with other people's art by making your own art of their art. There's a very easy one where it's like, do this in your style. That hashtag, you could look that up and find the art that inspires you, or the ideas that inspire you, the people that you want to connect with, or the people that do the same kind of things that you want to do, and do their stuff in your style. You're promoting them. They have far more reason to say something back, or perhaps even spotlight you. And that's a really great way. If you have the skills, it's a really great way to get a big spotlight very, very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have anything to add to that, or we could go on to the next question? There's going to be a lot of questions, so I guess why don't we go on to the next question? So next question comes from, was that Francisco just now? I forget. Okay, I'll do a written question. And you could do the mic questions. How about that, Maureen?
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. So Jocelyn asks, how can you send your portfolio without there being an open position at the studios and possibly getting an interview? Oh, that's a good question.
I think it's about going to these networking events and getting in front, like either looking on LinkedIn and starting to figure out who the recruiter is. But the thing about like recruiters and like on that side is they get hundreds and hundreds of portfolios, like if not thousands. So like their day job is focused on getting those roles filled. And it's not like malicious intent if they don't get back to candidates or anything. It's like sometimes they're just like piles and piles, and you have to understand like some of these recruiting departments, there might be like 2 recruiters for a studio of 800 people. So it's not like purposeful that they're not getting back. And so it's tricky if you're not applying for a specific job that they're trying to fill, which is taking the majority of their energy to do so. So therefore it's about like, it's more about fostering relationships and how do you build that relationship over time. So first, kind of identifying like different network events you can go to, or even online networking. So you can go to Rise Up Animation or become part of Women in Animation. Like there's different like animation kind of networking groups that you can join. And a lot of the recruiters kind of go in and out of those. And then so do professionals, because we're all in there to volunteer because we want to give you feedback on your portfolio. We want you to become part of our industry if you're not already in it. Like the intention is there. It's just, limited time. So figure out where you can meet people, where they're at. Don't expect them to 100% come to you, but what are ways that you can find that connectivity? If you're going to reach out on LinkedIn, again, go with purpose. So if you're going to reach out to a recruiter and say, hey, and again, this goes back to kind of disarming, like if you were doing it in real life, you're disarming it on email. I realize that you're super busy right now. I'm sure you have so many jobs to fill. I know there's not a position that I can apply to yet, but I know all your experience in X, Y, and Z. And if you have 20 minutes, I have these specific questions I would love to ask you. And if you don't have time for a phone call, can I email you those questions? So giving them an option to say yes and yes, and not to close, and just say, and if it's, and this isn't time sensitive, like, please get back to me on your time. I know your time is, precious, so I appreciate it. So anytime, again, it's about the acknowledgement, what you're coming to the table with, so your intention, and then how they can reach you, and giving them kind of different variations of that mode, so that way they don't feel pressured to spend that energy. And so, like, as a manager right now, I was on a podcast, and I rep both writers and visual storytellers. And I had somebody who listened to the podcast I was on recently and said, hey, I don't know if you're taking on new clients, but I heard you on this podcast. Would love to pick your brain on X, Y, and Z. So, like, filled my bucket, filled my ego, because she listened to something. She was able to call back from kind of certain things I was saying on the podcast. And while I don't have any room on my roster, like, the way she formed her email and her intentions and her purpose, all putting in there, I'm going to spend 30 minutes with her on a call and see if I can form a relationship. So just look at different avenues. And if one doesn't respond, like, look at a few other kind of ways to open those doors. But just because one person doesn't get back to you, that doesn't mean they don't like you or they don't want to. Especially if you're reaching out on LinkedIn, like, I have people reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I have Gmail, I have my work email. And sometimes I honestly, not out of, again, malicious intent, I just forget to email back, or like, where did this person reach out to me on? And so even following up, and maybe like a couple weeks later, and just say, hey, just want to bump this to the top of your inbox. Again, share your slam. If you have any time, I would even take 10 minutes. But just wanted, and sometimes just bumping it back into somebody's inboxes, to the top of their inbox is important. So just, again, believe in good intentions when you're reaching out. Don't create a narrative that's not there. I think sometimes we create narratives that this is what this person is doing. They don't think my work is good enough. Like, we start filling each other in our heads with stuff that doesn't exist. And then that becomes kind of a base of like kind of how we're networking and putting our energy out. So just Marie Kondo your thought process a little bit, your creative thought process. Believe, again, in, like, if you need your daily affirmations, if you need whatever it is, but keep that kind of positive energy, and eventually you'll start knocking down those doors one by one, and you'll start building those bridges.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, it's palpable when you kind of bring that baggage to a conversation. Like, people can pick up on that you're coming there. Like, it's different to have an intention and to kind of already have like preloaded in your head, like Allison saying, what's going to happen. And I think that can put somebody who's on the other side, like, then I feel like I'm in a box because that's what you're interested in. And if I don't have anything to speak to about that, like, I don't really have anywhere to go from there. Like, I'm not a recruiter and I don't have that background. I don't see these things in the same way. But I do tend to bring on a lot of artists in my own company to work with creatively as collaborators. And I can say that, those who approach with sort of a kind and helpful, interested, curious disposition are the ones that I tend to be like, oh, wow. And even if same thing, I'm like, I've got to get back to that person and maybe I don't. That person following up is like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed the way this person reached out. I want to respond to this person. That earnestness is felt and conveyed And I think also in my experience in animation, there are far more people than there are not that want to find a way for you to get in. Everybody's trying to create, an avenue and figure out how do we find you, right? So it's just as helpful for you to come find us, but that context is super important. And I also want to go back to something Allison mentioned, which was Rise Up and Women in Animation. They're amazing mentorship programs. I have some experience working with women in animation myself and working in the mentorship program. So I really do admire, respect, and appreciate the impact that those programs have and the professionals they do engage in it. And from what I have experienced and seen, a lot of those communities stay intact because the folks that you're meeting in those spaces are your lateral peers. They're going to rise with you. Like you're not, always going to a person who's a few levels above you creates a certain dynamic, a certain type of mentorship, a certain type of professional relationship. But when you are progressing in your career, you want that cohort of creative people around you. You want that think tank and those folks who are at different studios. So starting to look at it as not only an upward type of networking model, but laterally, and who's around you and what are they doing? And then fostering those relationships, not only as professional ones, but, to the extent that you're comfortable and that it's natural, as personal ones. A lot of my people that I work with, I consider friends. A lot of mentors are some of my closest friends in the industry. And so that's also, I think, a component once you sort of find the mode that you're connecting with folks that can be really valuable and encouraged, especially I think a whole group of artists going through the same thing when we share those same awkwardnesses or insecurities or, just the unsureness of how to proceed. There's power in groups. And so I'm a big, big fan of encouraging folks to go that route.
For some low-hanging fruit for Jocelyn, especially if you're in the LA area, LightBox Expo, right? Rise Up Animation, WIA, as well as a whole bunch of other associations, and every big studio pretty much is all going to be there. And there is a section in LightBox Expo which is for portfolio reviews, and that's open to anybody. And you would get portfolios reviewed by people like one of them is Rob Bliss, that designed Dobby from Harry Potter. He's doing portfolio reviews, and Dermot Power that worked on Christopher Nolan's Batman. Then there's also this one, all the sponsors are very excited about, which is the artist database, right? All the attendees, all the exhibitors and presenters, they're all encouraged to create an account on the LightBox Expo artist database. And then the sponsors, I believe, and towards the end of next month or the month after that, in early September, they will get access to artist database and be able to find the artists that they're looking for easier, right? And it's always been a big part of my mission to try to put the spotlight on the people that need the spotlight or deserve the spotlight, and that's what is a huge focus about LightBox Expo. If you can't make it, there's also the Discord, LightBox Expo Discord, which has a wonderful, very large community.
Yeah, that list was super important for me for LBX. I went through every single person in portfolio and figured out who it was that I wanted to talk to. So everybody going to LBX definitely invest in that. Allison, have you guys been at LBX?
Yeah, I went back in, what was it, 2019, I think, pre-pandemic.
Rick has a big presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys have any advice specifically on navigating, like, networking at LBX conference?
Bobby?
Come prepared with your artwork. I would have two different versions, one on your phone for situations that are not like portfolio review specific, but you're chatting with somebody and you can easily show your art. And then one that's a larger format, like a light, larger format. Don't give people heavy laptops, right? Maybe on an iPad. Yeah, and do your research. Pinpoint the people that you would really like to talk to. I do that all the time with every event I go to. I search the list and I go, yeah, I really would love to meet this person, right? And really search them
Same.
out. You
Same.
guys do that?
Yeah. Like Annecy, when I get to go, I like look at all the filmmakers. I email them ahead of time to set meetings.
Mhm.
So I make a spreadsheet like just of the people that I want to start building relationships with. So like you can look online and see who's there and like reach out ahead of time and just say, hey, I'm going to pop by your booth. This is who I am.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually we help people at Lightbox. Sorry, I go back to Lightbox, but this is really cool
Yep.
because we help the sponsors at Lightbox be able to do this. So all the main sponsors, they all have a booth for the artist database meetups, right? And so they can find you online first. They could set up a time that's good for you and good for them. And then you would meet in real life at the booth, in Lightbox.
Yeah, I also think there's something to be said for like the experience of going to such an event, which is very stimulating and can be really overwhelming. So if you don't go to it with a plan or a sense of the structure, you could take 2 steps in the door and be like, what do I need to do? And I personally would probably just start sweating in that moment if I feel like, and then everyone who meets me right after that meets me as like the person who was like sweaty and babbly and like, didn't really seem as composed as like, that's my own like internal struggle. So my preparedness in terms of like, what are the things that I'm going to want or need to be successful? And it could be, like Bobby said, you have your art piece, right? You have your preparation, like Allison said, of who am I going to reach out to, who's there, and how do I want to contact them? And then there's like the very human side of you that like needs to understand, like, you've got water, when you're going to have lunch, you've got snacks, like you need to take care of yourself and be fresh and in a good place. Like otherwise you're just running. And then by the time you meet that 6th or 7th person, again, you're the person who's been running. So also recognizing that this is your first impression in some cases, and being sort of, fresh, energized. And, even if that means taking a break, maybe that's like, I only am going to be there for this many hours in the morning. I'm going to go take a break, decompress, and come back. There are multi-day events where you can do something like that if you're planning and you're thinking about it. So I also try to take these really big moments and distill them down into what are my goals and what does it realistically take for me to feel like I'm going to make this time meaningful. And what does that mean to me? So like, again, that intention that we've touched on a few times, so that you're really setting yourself up to have a good experience. I have a previous life in museums as well. And I feel like there's a similar analogy here. And I use this every time people go to me. I say, don't try to do everything today. Pick 1 or 2 things you really want to do and do those things. And if you're energized and you're excited about it, then like have a 3rd idea of what you might want to do. But if you just do those things, that's great. And I don't want it to sound like too idealistic or too optimistic, but I do feel that setting a reasonable expectation for yourself so that those wins, you can really feel them and appreciate them and not have them be, drowning in the bigger sea of everything that's going on around you. So I've also found that tends to be a strategy of mine in just navigating those really overstimulating, very crowded places.
I have a tip. So I have a total social anxiety. People can't tell because SU, I need to be loud and obnoxious sometimes. But
I couldn't tell.
one thing I do is like even meeting Bobby, I was so nervous meeting. It was at a pre-Annie Award party, Netflix. And so I was there with Nicole. And I just stood by Nicole and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Bobby. I'm so nervous. Can you introduce me to him? And so I just like put it on somebody else. And that's what I do oftentimes at some of these events. I find somebody I know, I go and then I verbal diarrhea on them with all my insecurities about like, I want to meet this person. I'm so nervous. And I tell them all my fears. And then they're my champion. And they'll talk me up. I mean, this is my anxiety blanket, so maybe it's not emotionally healthy, but this is what I do. And then they pump me up to go talk to them, or they'll be like, here, I'll go with you. And then they'll like drag the other person in or do the intro. So if you do have social anxiety like me, you can always ask other people to help you in that way if there's a friendly face. I was invited to a party as a +1 for a Ted Sarandos party at Netflix, and I just saw Sergio Pablo's the Klaus director, and he was the only person I knew because I had met him just one other time at View Conference when I said hi. That's it. I made a beeline, and then I meet like, I'm so nervous. I don't know anyone here. Can you hang out with me? And then so that kind of broke the ice and made myself vulnerable. And then he also felt like he had to help me because he couldn't be like, no, I'm a dick. And I'm like, I couldn't talk to you. So then he was my home base the entire night, which was awesome to be with.
That's so
Everyone
good.
was coming up to him to talk. So I'm like, this is great for networking. I don't have to do anything. And then we saw Eddie Murphy. And I'm like, hey, I'm too nervous to go. He's like, it's okay, I'll go with you. And so that worked out really well. But you guys can try that if it helps you guys.
Buddy
I love-
systems are always the best. Buddy system.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, some of my best experiences networking were the most terrifying because I was by myself. That is the best scenario to meet people, I feel, because just like Maureen says, people will almost like feel sorry for you and bring you into the group, and then you're in, like FMX, I knew nobody. And that was such a wonderful experience again, where nobody knew me and I didn't know anybody. And just trying to navigate, I remember going into one of those circles at the bar and they're all talking. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get in the circle. Hey, everybody, not like just being very genuine and just going, I came here by myself. I don't know anybody. I was just wondering if I could, kind of join the circle and see what you guys are all about. This is what I do. And then they said what they do and blah, blah, blah. Shall we go to another question?
Yeah. Do you want me to do the hand?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, let's do that.
Refakat, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. You have the floor. Wait, did that work? Yes. Hi. To unmute. Hopefully she's still there. Refakat, you there? Well, we can keep you up and go to a text question if she comes back. Is that the protocol, Bobby?
We could go to Alicia. Yeah, why don't we just go to Alicia next?
Okay. Alicia, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, great. I'm glad that worked. So I guess I typed it down and I hope you don't mind me asking it verbally. So are there any questions or things that you shouldn't do when you're talking to new people that, give off a bad impression? I mean, subtle things in terms of networking or, something that's considered taboo or something, or just gives a bad impression.
For me, I call them Captain Demandos. It's I people who feel like that you owe it to them to do whatever your intentions are. So I think again, it's finding common ground and being clear about your intentions, and also you have to drive conversation. If it's something that you're approaching somebody else, figure out how to move that conversation forward. And sometimes that's really hard because it takes a little bit of self-awareness and understanding your own brand. But you have to, if you have 5 minutes to talk to this human and sell them on you and what you want to get out of it, you have to use that time wisely. So I think sometimes when people come up and they assume I have time, making assumptions oh, can you look at my portfolio right now? It's don't put people on the spot of assuming that they have the time. So I think just niceties in general, being polite, assuming and good intentions. I think I find that some people get really defensive at times. So if you're looking for feedback on something and you're sitting down and you don't like the feedback, like work on your feedback face. You know what I mean? Like, which is hard to do, but like in our world, like it's not a one size fits all. Everybody looks for something a little bit different in every studio. So that's where, again, personal observation. So if you have a portfolio and you're interested in Nickelodeon and then the Walt Disney Animation Studio, for example, those are two different portfolios and what you want to get out of those portfolios. So first, it's like acknowledging maybe what you feel is lacking in your portfolio and seeing where they can potentially give you feedback so that they can direct you in the right way to get you the correct sort of portfolio so you could get a job. So I think it's, yeah, that's, I guess, my points on that.
Yeah, asking a lot of questions, like having questions, and they don't even have to be like, in my experience, like, you know, you may only have 5 minutes, but if you have more than that, they don't have to be all very like to the point, professional, specific questions. Like if you are finding that the person you're speaking to is receptive and you have a great energy and you're building this back and forth, like there are questions about that person or their journey or how they got to where they are, or, you know, how they balance their work and life. And like, there are some, like Allison said before, like people do like to talk about themselves. And so if you are trying to understand the industry at large, like it's not just that one portfolio question. If you have an opportunity to talk to somebody in it, you want to ask them questions about other parts of the industry, you might find that there's another lens that you're given and another avenue to pursue if you feel like the conversation is stalling. So I'm never like afraid to consider what other things I might want to know from a professional aside from just my immediate job and portfolio feedback needs. But yeah, and on feedback too, you know, as an artist, it's like you're used to getting feedback, solicited and unsolicited. And so working through how you handle that with grace and where you learn from that feedback versus where you maybe say, no, that's my point of view. And, you know, there's a balance there too. So I think having a kind and humble way of approaching people is really important.
I like the idea of just, you know, being vulnerable, being honest, because that goes so much further, especially in networking events where everybody's kind of trying to posture up and trying to act like they're more awesome than they are. And then the other thing is like, even if you're there for a bunch of people, make it about that person in that moment. You know, like, I remember one person saying like, oh yeah, I really wanted to see Ian McKeag, but he has this big lineup. Would you mind looking at my portfolio? Of course I did, but you know, I was definitely not the first choice.
That must have made you feel good.
I
Nothing like
laughed it off,
feeling that.
you know.
Millie said something like I got up to an art director and just went blank. Like sometimes like that happens to me and I like to just crack a joke. Like I have a forgetful memory these days and sometimes I say I'm like a goldfish. So just like, you don't need to be self-deprecating, but like sometimes like acknowledging maybe where you're at right now of like, oh my God, I had this question. It was so important. And I don't know, I'm lack of sleep and it's been such a good conference, but I'm such a huge fan of yours. I know it's going to come back and then like maybe come up with another question or something, but just like to ease that like lull in the conversation and make it less awkward.
Speaking of awkward, Alicia, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to put you back in the audience.
Thank you.
Is
All
Rafa
right, and same with
You're gonna put her down.
yeah, I think let's
Okay.
put her back. And let's go to written questions, shall we? There's a lot of questions all talking about online. You know, I have a question. This comes from Sabrina, and Sabrina says, how would you recommend networking when you're working or doing online school and not living in California? How do you make your presence known to bigger artists? I think the best thing to do is really do stuff that they want to promote, they want to see, right? So like fan art of their stuff, if they're doing any challenges, people love to respond to things that they're promoting. There's a lot of people that may comment on my stuff. The ones I generally will respond to are the ones that, and this goes back to what Allison was saying, wherever she is on your screen, just saying like, ask questions that essentially are easy to answer, right, Allison? Like you were saying a bunch of stuff where it's like, oh, you're just looking for a yes or a no. That I could do very easily. If you ask me how to draw hands, how do you draw hands, Bobby? I'm like, oh, shoot, I need to write a book to tell you and answer you, right? And I'm not going to do that.
But please write the book, because I also need to practice hands. They're hard.
Mittens, so many mittens in portfolios. Just draw mittens. I think that's really good. But I think I gave the example of the reverse recruiting that I do, like passive. So if like, as I think, figuring out what your goals are. So if your goal, as an example, is to get into Studio X, one of the feature studios, you look and see what movies they made, which you should probably already be a super fan if that's where you're applying. Look at on IMDb, look for the artists that worked on those, and then go find them online and then connect. Like, I think sometimes we forget that all of these resources, you guys just need to become super detectives. So if there's like a person or something that you want, like all of it, it's not just like to fan out, but there's something you're trying to achieve. So again, set your intention and then reverse engineer how to get to that human, because you're a fan of whatever that X is or whatever that goal is.
And by doing the research, taking steps, like, again, breaking things down into manageable steps of like, what's a great way to get to this next place? That's a small step. Like, it's not just one big leap. All of a sudden I have to get in touch with this one person and only that, like extrapolating it into a few different scenarios that that you can pursue, and different roads of, questioning and different approaches to it can be really helpful to make a big problem or a big new goal feel a lot more attainable.
I also want to address the whole entire idea of bigger artists, like the biggest artists. I generally don't cold email them, cold call them, or cold kind of just approach them. I do what Maureen mentioned before about like getting an intro. And if I can't get that intro, if I can't get a good intro, I will do what I call circling the wagon. Find out their best, closest friends and start going for them. And then, by the time you go for that main person, you have so much more in common. You have so many more things to talk about, and so many more people to kind of say, yeah, take that call. Takes longer. But.
So much work, man.
And just don't not feed their ego by saying, you aren't my first choice.
Yeah. I also don't say that they were my first choice. You don't want to lie, but you could leave some things out.
Like I met Tom Moore the other day. Yeah, exactly. Who, if you don't know, is the director of Wolfwalkers and is one of the owners of Cartoon Saloon. And I've been a huge fan for a really long time, like really long time. And so my friend Aubrey Mintz is on the board of ASIFA and is friends with Tom. And so I asked him to intro us. And then it was he did. And then it was my job to continue following up. But like, one of my icebreakers and this is true, my daughter is a huge fan of Wolfwalkers. It's her favorite movie. So I said my intentions of the conversation was to get to know and see how we could collaborate, but also that the fact that my 6-year-old had like some questions for him on how he made Wolfwalkers. And so it just gave a little bit more of like, it's not just about business, but some personal. And I think that helps diffuse. That way somebody doesn't have to feel like that's on the spot the whole time. And so I think just finding a personal connection of like, and it's also one of my favorite movies. So I think like if you're authentic in what you want to do, it will come across and people will be more generous with their time than you think.
Something else, like I don't know why, but it triggered like a memory with me, Allison, as you're talking. Sometimes I do kind of like, I call it the drive-by, I'm gonna walk past them, I'm gonna say something, I'm not gonna stop, and then I'll come back. Right. And this is for like, we did this, Kay, oh my goodness, she's so good. And she did this with Woody Harrelson. So we're walking and she sees Woody Harrelson and she points at him and she goes, "You're awesome." And then she kept walking and then got a coffee and came back to him and it's like chatting it up with him. Because it gives this kind of feeling like, hey, where are you going? Usually people stop. And then the person stops, comes back and you're like, oh, okay, I am kind of important still. Okay, yeah, what's up? And it just gives that.
But also,
yeah.
If you treat them like just a normal human too, like there was a celebrity that I was at Whole Foods. God, I'm blanking on her name. She was in Interview with a Vampire, the blonde.
Kristen Dunst.
Kristen Dunst. And she was there with her husband. So my kids were looking at the toys. Her kid was looking at the toy. And she just started talking to me like just a normal mom. So like if you don't make it like a big deal and you don't make it awkward, like you can find commonality too. You know what I mean? Like, celebrities and famous artists are just like us. They just, a little praise, a little connectivity goes a long way.
Yeah.
But I like your like making celebrities feel not important. That's a good angle. Hey.
Yeah, I learned it from Kay. That was so brilliant. She just went by,
Okay.
"You're awesome," and just kept walking. I was like, who did you just talk to? Anyways, yeah.
The ego thing, by the way, is super nice because sometimes people the artist could be really humble and they're a big deal, but they don't realize that they're a big deal or they don't think that they're really great. And so when you tell them that you're a big fan, it does make them feel good because they may not think that about themselves. So I think that definitely works for me to say flattery totally works for me.
Great. Why don't we go to another question here? So, wow, a lot of event questions and a lot of online questions. I'm just going to go to one I didn't fully read out loud. Let's surprise ourselves. Anonymous says, how would you suggest approaching someone in an event or in a situation where you're new to the field and probably don't have enough professional experience, not enough clout, but you're trying to make your transition into it? For example, a visual artist entering the concept art world. I think like one thing just to kind of start the conversation here is, especially at events, I think about what does everybody else ask this person? And don't ask that because you just become invisible instantly. That's, I think like a good example is, Mike Mignola. What's everybody gonna say to Mike Mignola? I love Hellboy, or I loved your art ever since whatever, Hellboy, or I don't know. Try to say something different. Anything.
Yeah, I think too.
How it influenced. Sorry,
I was gonna say in terms of like a transition or like getting into a new field, I think one of the things to kind of remind yourself is there's no direct path to like anything. It feels like a lot of people have, there are things you can follow, but there are also a lot of different ways to get to where you're going. And so like having a background that's not exactly what maybe you expect everyone else in the room to be there, you know, having come from one place that you're not from. I just find that that has been kind of one of the more interesting ways to connect with people at events when they're not really from that space. Because I, as a person who am working in that industry, I'm interested to know where they're coming from and how it applies to what we're doing. I just feel like there's a lot more connectivity in skills and various types of fields, and the animation industry is huge with so many opportunities in all different kinds of ways and all different kinds of capacities. So we are talking a lot about art, and that's obviously very specific, but there are different paths that can be relevant and interesting when you connect with the right person. So, you know, my background is varied, and it's not just a linear, like my first job was not in animation, my second job was not in animation, my third job was not in animation, right? So it was just more about going to these events and being like, hey, I like the community here, I like the culture of the people that are working in this space, I love what they make. I find that there's a lot of intersection in my background that maybe isn't super obvious. And I've leaned into that as a way to figure out how can I bring value to this community by bringing my different experience or my different path forward. And how can I speak about that in a way that's exciting and that I can be really proud of. And then you start to sort of fall into all the other things we've said where, well, now I'm speaking with energy, I'm speaking authentically, like I'm asking questions, someone's maybe now curious about me. And I think all those things wrap up in a really memorable kind of interaction where, like Bobby said, nobody came up to me maybe and had that was coming from that place before, and them wanting to just kind of get information or understand what's available or get bearings in it or what are my next steps. I find that those tend to be really fascinating conversations that add a lot of value.
I totally agree. And something that we were talking about earlier, and Annalise, you picked up on or talked about, which is leading with curiosity. So when I'm having conversations, it's not just like what the person is creating, but like how they look at life and how they lead their life. So like when I got my internship at Nickelodeon, which was my foot in the door, while it was my passion for animation that, you know, in my cover letter, I rescued seals for 3 years. That was actually the conversation starter. It had nothing to do with animation, but they wanted to know, like, wow, you spent 3 years rescuing seals. Like, what was that like? And so, like, sometimes something that is completely out of our industry can be the icebreaker to a conversation. And so if there's some sort of other commonality outside of the craft that you can kind of lean in on, and then also that can help influence how you operate in this business. At the end of the day, it's about like connecting with an individual, and it doesn't always have to be just about our industry. It could be something a little bit more personal that could resonate and like be just different. What sets you apart? What is that? If you're pitching a project, you want that hook. What is your hook in setting yourself apart from the rest of the pack?
That's a great hook, Allison. Like you got us, like definitely me. I was like, seals, what? I want to learn more, which is great because it's a cliffhanger, right? Sometimes you get these intros or you meet somebody and they kind of just verbally diarrhea, just everything about them. So there's no more questions, right? And it's just like, okay, well, I guess our conversation's done. But I think somebody was mentioning like a lot of this stuff, it's kind of like a dance, right? You got to go back and forth. So it leaves some cliffhangers. You're an artist. That's it? That you're just going to tell me you're an artist? What kind of art do you do? And then you could get into it a little bit, as opposed to saying, this is where I started. I went to school here, then I got a job here, then blah, 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 blah. Because we get those kind of intros sometimes, right? Where it's almost like, it feels like the person is thinking they don't have enough time, so they're going to just try to give you everything.
Yeah. That elevator pitch, get it down.
Yeah.
Yes, Donna, I want to talk roofing. That would be great. I'm having, especially for my house, would love some advice. See, you never know. You never know. There was a question in here, Bobby, about anxiety, which I thought was good. That was from, where did it disappear to? I feel like, was it in the end somewhere? Should have been more prepared.
I
But it
think
was
it's
basic.
about how if you have anxiety, how do you approach these situations when you have to go talk to somebody?
I think
I just try to, you know what, Beyonce helped me with this because she said in a video, she said when she goes on stage, she's no longer Beyonce, she's Sasha Fierce, you know, and you put on that mask, right? I always remembered that. And it's like, okay, just got to put on that mask because I think naturally I am somewhat leaning more towards introvert.
I always think that it's just people. Like, to me, like, this was probably always been my problem in corporate America, is like, I do like see everybody as an equal, whether you're just starting out all the way to a CEO. To me, you're a human, right? And I'll respect you no matter what your level. We're all on a journey. We're all on a path. We all have shit we're trying to like overcome. There's adversity. Like, we're full of layers. We're just all onions, like trying to make it. So to me, I just remind myself, what's the worst can come if I approach this person? They can reject me. They don't have time. That is the worst that can happen. The best outcome, we become the best of friends and we have coffee and we text every single day. So that's like best case scenario. So it's like, and it obviously, and most of the time it just meets in the middle. But I talk about manifestation a lot. And like, it's really about like, manifestation isn't necessary. It's a mindset. And the mindset is like putting out the energy and verbalizing what you want out into the world. Because as I said earlier, people don't know what they don't know. And so you have to fight that anxiety if there's goals you want to achieve. Like, and know that on the other end, the people that you're talking to most likely have that same anxiety, right? They might be introverted. They might be socially awkward. They may not know how to have conversations. Even if you're like, this is who I want to be, they're struggling internally too. So just remember, like, sometimes it's meeting people where they're at and then just having an understanding and going into the expectations of they're just a person and they had to fight to get to where they're at as well. And sometimes that's a little comforting to me when I'm approaching people.
I absolutely agree. That's like like standing in that spot going, I saw someone else in the chat say, I say 1, 2, 3, and on 3 I go. Like, when you make that decisive moment, that's probably the last thing I say to myself, like in my head, is like, okay, they don't know who I am either. This could go any which way. Like, I just try to like ground it in that, like, you know, like try to be on both sides of it and practice empathy. And I think that has kind of helped to make me feel like I'm taking the pressure off myself. It's not a one-sided thing. It's not only up to me to facilitate a great interaction. Like, this person also has to be on board, and it can go in a lot of different directions. So just kind of taking a big breath and saying, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. We're going to play it by ear. I'm going to do the best I can. If we don't connect, it's just important that I was kind, I was polite. I was maybe it was an instance where I could be helpful. Maybe somebody is trying to put up a banner and they need someone who happens to be my height, and to jump over there and introduce myself that way, like looking for these opportunistic moments to sort of have those connections, but also understanding that like they're, you know, they've been where you are, they might be exactly where you are, and to just try to think about it that way.
You know, I have anxiety going on a roller coaster, right? And a lot of times I convert that to excitement. I just remind myself, I just convince myself this isn't anxiety, because they often feel like the same thing. Excitement and anxiety, they're almost like cousins. And so I take that to the stage as well. If I'm going to get on that stage, I remember like in Sao Paulo, they had this huge stage for us, and it was like the largest audience we ever spoke in front of. We could hear the sounds of their voices through the vibrations of the wall. And that was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty nervous. And then I just convinced myself, no, I'm excited, right? And you just go, I just remember going to my feet and going, we're doing this, keep walking, and then brain, you know, figure it out. We're doing this. And then you just kind of just keep walking. Yeah.
There's an article in the New York Times about how anxiety can be good and how to do exactly that, which is turn your anxiety to be useful. Because if it's fight or flight, it's just adrenaline, right? So it is the same as excitement. So you take that adrenaline and be like, I'm gonna go fight instead of flight, but in a positive way.
Fantastic. Oh, we have Tangi just raised their hand. I'll just, oh, perfect.
Angie,
Thank
you
you.
have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi everybody. Cannot wait to see you guys at Lightbox if you're coming.
Yay.
I already got my ticket in my hotel. I'm so excited. Okay, so the question I have is, much like the other question, I'm transitioning from one field to the next, and I'm currently working on a portfolio, but I want to be realistic with the amount I can actually develop between now and my old work. Is it worth, what kind of value can you get from even just one portfolio piece? Is it worth showing to get talking points or to even make a connection, or should you wait till something's more developed?
Does anybody, like, I think go for it. Yeah, you should do that one piece. You know,
Right,
like,
just to set the tone.
yeah, it's really not about 20, like the amount of pieces, as Allison could probably, I don't know, I'm guessing, like you're saying hundreds of portfolios. I'm imagining that you're not looking through all of these portfolios, and you could
It takes me 30
probably,
seconds
yeah, you
to determine if
probably
it.
can tell from perhaps the first image most of the time, right?
But 100%. I think it is though about having, it's about quality over quantity. I normally say, like, if you have like 5 solid pieces that live in the same world and in the same discipline, that's very helpful. Like if I'm reading writers, for example, like I'll read one, and if I really love that script, I'm going to ask for another sample. So it's like almost like being at Costco. It's like you taste the, like, whatever, like the sample is, and you're like, okay, this is delicious. Now I want some more, and maybe I'll buy. So it's like kind of that same idea. It's like you're kind of dating a little bit and trying to figure out if this is going to be your jam and if it's going to be a fit.
Like speed dating.
It is like speed dating. I also have like when I get connected to somebody who's just either transitioning their career or shifting stuff up, even with clients, I have a 3 strikes you're out rule. So the first one is like, okay, we're going to have a meeting. This is what I want to see in your portfolio. This is what we want to do. So for our next meeting, this is what you need to have achieved. And then in the second meeting, there's normally 2 different individuals. There's the people that listen to me and like did all the things, which is amazing because I can continue fighting for you, because what recruiters do and what managers do is pitch you on a constant. But our jobs is to want to get you a job if we feel a connection. But we're also gatekeepers. Like if you're not listening, that's a huge red flag. And then there's the people that don't listen. So you're like, okay, that's cute. Maybe it didn't really resonate what I was saying. So I'm going to give you the tips again. And by the 3rd meeting, if nothing has changed, I tell people, I'm like, look, you must have a lot going on in your world, but I can't keep spending time with you. Like my time, those 30 minutes that we're hanging out, super precious. So when you get your shit together and you're ready to like really take this seriously, totally here for you. But for right now, like we're breaking up. So that's kind of where I think you as a creative, it's like, okay, you got this one, but what's next? And who, like, are you connecting with people who are giving you advice? And are you leaning in? Are you showcasing that you can listen and that you're evolving yourself as a creative? I think that's something that's it's not just about like the piece, but the evolution of creativity.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
Yeah, of course. But congrats on changing it up. I love a change.
Oh, yes,
Love it.
going after my dream. Thank
I
you.
love it. Love it. I'm directing a short right now, so I believe in going after your dreams. I believe not being boxed in, and just if there's something you want to do and nobody's giving you the opportunity, you make the opportunity.
Make it right.
Hey, Tangi,
I
one
get it.
last little thing that I want to mention is I don't know, I prepare myself for difficulty and success, with especially with transitions. So if difficulty comes, you're prepared for it, you're not blindsided. And if success comes, you're also prepared for it to capitalize on it. Right. And
Love that.
so the failure idea or the difficulty idea is, I picture myself just almost like Johnny Appleseed, just throwing these little seeds, these little portfolios, these little connections everywhere, and hardly any of them grow. But I'm just looking for one to grow into something substantial, something amazing, big apple tree. And that's all I need,
That's so
So-
helpful because I've been trained through school to, expect difficulty, but I've never really prepared for success. And there's been a few times where success happened without me realizing, and I froze and canceled my own. I just got scared. I didn't even realize I didn't prepare to win. So that's really important to remember. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. So I hope that answered your question. I'll put you back into the audience here. All right. Since we did 2 written questions just before that, do you want to do another audio question?
Yeah. Let's see. You mean visual, right? Written. Okay. How do I network on LinkedIn for a portfolio review or a job? Or is that not the correct platform to use? There's a whole bunch of LinkedIn questions, actually.
Oh, okay. I have no idea. I barely understand that
I-
platform.
I have just one note on that because, as I said, I'm not a recruiter. I'm not someone that looks at portfolios in that way. And so one of the things that I would say to everyone using LinkedIn is, I think this has been touched on, please make sure the person you're reaching out to, like, that is something that they do or they have a function doing, or, just because someone's at a studio or has something, that doesn't automatically mean that they're qualified or it's part of what their day-to-day is, or that they can do anything with it. And I think that's kind of the number one way to, sounds harsh, have it be totally ignored. Frankly, like I get them and I have to either respond, this isn't, I'm not able to do this, or that feels bad sometimes. And I don't like that, but sometimes that's the case because like we've said, the volume is so plentiful. And I look at it as, oh, this person saw maybe one line of text somewhere in my profile and decided they were throwing it all at me. But that just tells me that person wasn't actually researching, wasn't aware, didn't look through actually what my job is. They didn't ask me anything about what I do or how I might be able to inform their research. They just assumed and threw something at me that I can't do anything with. And that also it doesn't feel good on the other side. I don't like the way that feels, because I like to be helpful. I like to be able to give someone advice, but I can't do that all day long. And especially when it's not my job. So I think when you're using LinkedIn, being very careful and attentive to who you're reaching out to, something that you want to discuss, or some question you have about their experience, or clarity around where you need to go to get to where you're trying to go. But just kind of that would be my one tip of advice, is to be really certain who you're reaching out to and what the purpose of that communication is.
Okay.
Wonderful. Why don't I'll do the audio question then. When we bring Francisco up to the stage here, you got the mic, Francisco.
Francisco's back.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
back.
So I'm wondering if it's good to be like an expert on something, a concept artist, a background artist, and an animator, because I personally believe I would love to hear your opinion about this. I personally feel bad just to knowing one thing, I know you can know a lot of things, but you're not an expert in one thing. So you guys, what do you think that the studios appreciate more, like someone who have multiple skills, or just something specific and the guy is an expert on it. Like, do you,
Depends on the
what do
job. Yeah, it
Most of the
depends on
times
the
it's
job.
specific. So
Yeah.
it's a specific, I always say, don't be a jack of all trades, master of none. Like, at least have like the one thing you mastered, even if you have curiosity about others. It's good about knowing about the pipeline, but most of the time we're hiring for a specific job and discipline. And I don't want to pick a role that you may not be 100% invested in. So if you're like, I like animation, storyboarding, and visual development, like, which oftentimes are the three kind of disciplines that are lumped together when people are graduating from school. I always tell, if you're stuck on an island, you have to pick one, which one would it be that you have to do for the rest of your life? And it's good to know how all these kind of inner work together. Like, that's super important, because you want to understand, when you're working in that pipeline, how does your role impact the others? And so the more that you understand, the better teammate you're going to be. But I think that's kind of the frustrating part. Even when I'm working with some of my clients, I'm like, think of your brand. And it doesn't mean you can't switch later, but if you think of yourself like a business, and I always kind of give the example of how Apple and Microsoft started. They started out in a garage working on one product, right? Like, they had an idea, they worked on the product, and then consumers started to trust that product. And then over time, they started building new products, very, within their world, but they built upon it. And then the consumer knew, like, if I went to Microsoft, I can get X. If I went to Apple, I can do X. If all of a sudden they started doing something way off base, the consumer would be like, I don't know what to do with this. This is very jarring. And it will take a little bit of time to kind of get people to trust that direction. So if you think of yourself like a business, again, building that foundation, building that trust, that from the creative community, that if they go to you and they want to hire you for a character design, they know that they can go to your Instagram, they can go to your portfolio, and that's what they're going to see. That's what they know they can hire you for. And then as you're building out your career and you want to start dabbling in a different discipline, maybe you want to switch to storyboarding, maybe you want to try to be a director and you've been a character designer your whole, like, it's going to take some time to steer that ship, to get people to trust you, that you have that capability, that you have that skill set to execute within that expertise, that discipline. So again, you are a business, you're building a foundation that people will build trust in, and then they can go to you to hire. That's really what it is at the end of the day. And so, while you don't want to be the Cheesecake Factory where it's like everything, right? Like, that's overwhelming. So pick those few things. Don't be super high calorie about it. And I think you'll be solid.
Great. Hopefully that answered your question, Francisco. I'm going to put you back into the audience
Hello?
here.
I lost you.
Oh, well, sorry. I just realized you were saying I lost you. I'm sorry, Francisco. Hope you can still hear us. One last question. Why don't we go to this one here? That's a written question. I really like this one. I feel like I'm bad at networking because it feels fake. I usually just reach people when I want to make friends with them. And if that's not my primary intention, I feel like I'm taking advantage. So I end up not reaching out a lot. What are your thoughts? I feel like that one a lot of people can connect with.
I think that in my experience, I kind of mentioned this earlier, I've made some of my close friends in this industry. And I don't think that it's a problem to think in your head that two things can't both happen. So, like the idea that it's fake or it's, not, if you're going to an event or you're going to a conference or you're reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, like, we understand that that's part of what is happening, and that's part of the motivation, and that's part of why it's happening. But I don't feel that being on the receiving end, it feels fake. And I've had to talk to many people who've been on the receiving end beforehand for me to believe that, as the person that goes out and is trying to connect and meet people. And to talk about, what I'm interested in and ask them questions about what they're interested in. So I do think it comes back to the theme for me is just, it's always curiosity and finding something to connect with. That's personal doesn't mean it can't also be professional.
Wonderful. Any last tips on networking? Anything at all that you can think of? One that comes to mind is eye contact, especially at events where like you're talking to somebody and that person is listening. And then they keep wandering, they keep looking for other people who are in the room. I think
call it
just
the
be in the
entertainment
moment.
eye.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. Yeah, and just, be in the moment, be with that person and just listen to them. I think that's a really good kind of tip to go by.
Be present. Right?
Yeah.
I would like to also note though, like if you're neurodiverse and making eye contact is like challenging for you, or like obviously like most, I would say I'm neurodiverse as far as like being dyslexic. Like we all have kind of our different challenges. While it doesn't hinder my networking, like figure out ways that like can lean into your superpowers in different ways and like you can overcome. So like if you are like, if there's something that is like you can't, like I said, make eye contact, maybe there's a way to bring that up or something like that, or just giving people the opportunity to not make assumptions for the reasons why you're not
Stare at the pores on their nose.
Yes. Yes. Love that. Love that.
All right. Anything else that anybody can think of? One thing that comes to mind, like more like a category, is like Zoom calls, video calls and networking, things that may feel less effective, things that feel more effective. A very simple one that I do a lot of times is if I have something on, in screen, I'll start the meeting and I'll push it away. And that's a little cue, like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. All my focus is here. Or smiling when the camera turns on.
I'm
or
a
plant on the
fidgeter.
head.
Yes. I'm a fidgeter. So like, I know like for me, I have a hard time holding attention for longer than like a 30-minute meeting. I actually get a lot of anxiety on Zoom and everything. Like I can't sit still. So like I'm playing with stuff, like I have a pen I play with. So I like, if you're a fidgeter and you're like, I can't sit still, and like you have like I have concentration problems in that, like I just am like, what's shiny over here? Like I find something like a fidget spinner or something just to like, so I can be present. So
That's
whatever
a great
tools.
one. Yeah. That also I hear helps with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just takes your mind
Which
a
I have.
little bit off of what you have to do. All right. Well, we want to be very respectful for all these wonderful panelists and everything of their time. So I want to thank you, the audience, for watching and attending, all the wonderful questions. Thank you so much. And of course, our panelists, thank you for your precious time and your amazing stories, anecdotes, opinions, thoughts. And of course, my wonderful co-host, the amazing, incredible Maureen Fan. Thank you so much, Maureen.